Thank you so much for this really generous introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here, and particularly in this with this pioneering project. Really, I was having a meeting yesterday with the colleagues from Interreg, and this project was actually highlighted as a real best practice in terms of the current concerns that we have in terms of placing culture at the center of activities, in terms of all of the priorities that NEB has highlighted. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And I'm starting from the point of view of cross-domain collaborations, because really this is what this project is about, COCO for CCI, but also what the New European Bauhaus is about, and also what the work that I have been doing for the last 10 years in feeding policy directly from grassroots experimentation from multidisciplinary communities. So I will start with the very famous moment when the New European Bauhaus was announced by President von der Leyen as a co-creation space where architects, artists, students, engineers, and designers work together. So this idea of multidisciplinarity, cross-disciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, or transdisciplinarity, whichever way you like to frame it, was highlighted as something that's really essential now and extremely important. And a lot has happened since. This is something that we can cover a bit later in the talk. But what I want to talk about first is, where did these ideas come from? And I would say that some of the communities that have been part of the COCO for CCI project, and also some of the rest of us who have been working on placing culture at the center of cross-domain collaboration, have actually influenced policy quite a great deal in terms of getting to this point. So I'm going to start with a member of our community. I have founded MTF Labs 10 years ago now, and we have had over 8,000 contributors to MTF Labs. And this is Dmytro Izotov. He joined us in our labs at Slush in Helsinki. Dmytro is Ukrainian, and I decided to start with Dmytro because I have been following what he's doing right now. He joined us as a volunteer back then. He thought that he didn't have much to contribute to a cross-disciplinary innovation space, and it turned out that he was very quickly integrated into the labs and actually turned out to be a really great inventor. And this is just a case in point. What Dmytro is doing now, I think, is incredibly relevant for the moment that we are living through right now. He's part of the Global Shapers in Ukraine. This is the World Economic Forum group that's a network of inspiring young people under the age of 30 working together to address local, regional, and global challenges. And this is the way that communities on the ground are galvanizing together. This is why it's so important to support collaboration on the ground. And you can see Dmytro here listed as the core group that's actually being supported by the Cabinet of the Ministers of Ukraine to canvas for support for Ukraine. And we are sincerely hoping that Dmytro is keeping safe and that this initiative will continue. But this is just an example of what comes out of these communities who are so important in all of these aspects, not just as a sort of soft practice, but actually this is really powerful practice, this joining of forces. And Dmytro was seen at the beginning of this video as part of this group that contributed to what was probably a seminal moment in the 10 years of our labs, where we really had a case of human transformation that was so evident. We placed blind singer at the center of our activities here, with 30 cross-disciplinary practitioners and experts. And they designed a system whereby she was able to play music directly from her brain. And in the labs during this week in preparation for Slush in Helsinki, all of the people in the lab were able to train with this system to try and go up and down the musical scale. using their brain, and it would take them about 2 hours to do so. But then Rika, who is a vocal coach from the Sibelius Academy, put the neurofeedback sensor on, and she was able to play instantly. And then it dawned on us that the affordances that we present to people, the tools that we can invent for people, completely determine as to whether we call them able or disabled. And Rika was stuck with a paradigm that was developed during the mechanical era, when she wouldn't have been able to see a lever or a button to press. And therefore, as a result of that, she was categorized as someone with a disability, whereas actually turned out that, for instance, in an era of brain-computer interfaces and data-driven systems, she was far more talented than the rest of us. And this, of course, makes complete sense when you think about the fact that before there was the invention of a piano, we could not have had a pianist virtuoso. And before anybody invented a racing car, you couldn't have had a racing car driver champion. So the affordances that we build for people, these are absolutely essential in how we enable people to express themselves or to interact with society. And this is something that drives us. This is very much community driven. So what I wanted to do is also give you a very short insight, a few seconds of the community themselves saying what do they think that these labs do for them, or what are they about?
O MTF é criatividade, humanidade e diversidade.
Overwhelming, it's awe-inspiring and it gives me hope.
É uma família.
Exciting.
Conhecimento.
Partilha.
Passion.
Collaboration.
Criatividade.
Progressive.
Amor.
Sensing creative chaos.
Parque de diversões para nerds.
So yeah, this park for nerds is really how we started. 10 years ago, I founded MTF Labs with the idea that we needed to unite artists and scientists and academia and industry in a space of common understanding. And I was told that this was impossible because everybody spoke different languages. And I think for COCO for CCI, this is very, very clear. I think this is what the project has also been addressing. So what you can see here on the image, this is us, the Brainwave Quartet with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Barbican in London, bridging disciplines. And we were able to do this by placing music as a social glue. And at that time, I was directing a roadmap, an EU roadmap, and I actually noticed that the brilliance of the engineers and some of the research breakthroughs were completely disconnected from culture, from industry, and therefore the two sides needed to be joined together. So this was noticed when we were invited to take residence at the Microsoft Research New England by a whole series of luminary academics who were inspired by our activities and decided to create a manifesto for this, really highlighting how this can be a central force that unites, in this case, all areas of research. And we took this manifesto directly when we flew back. We flew to Luxembourg, this is 2014, so the creative unit was in Luxembourg at that time, and we took the manifesto directly to them. They couldn't believe it, that actually American Ivy League colleges had actually backed something that was originally a European idea. And this is another image that's really very much a case in point of the environment that we create, because this is not just a set of methods. This is actually a whole environment that is conducive to particular types of collaboration. In this case, during the biggest issue that we had with the huge immigration crisis in Europe in 2016, this is Rani Dar from Israel collaborating with Ahmad Bakri from Palestine in our labs in Berlin, basically breaking down divides. And then I took it upon myself to actually question what we can be as humans and how we are categorized and seen by people and what else we can be, and actually challenge ideas that people have only one specialism, and this is how they get boxed in. So for instance, here we have women in charge of technology areas in our largest event to date, which was over 800 people hands-on prototyping, deliberately placing role models that are different in the sense that you can be a world-renowned professor of robotics and AI, but also be a fashion designer in your spare time, or someone who is a global artist like Imogen Heap as also a blockchain activist, for example. And as a result of this type of opening our ideas towards what else we can be, we ended up with a technology prototyping event that had 53% declare themselves as female out of 4 options that we gave them. And this is from 800 participants, transgenerational participants, as you can see from the photograph, from the age of 3 to something like 73, I believe it was the eldest. So the social impacts are really quite incredible, but also economic impacts. I mean, this is one of our members, Tim Palm, also known as DJ Arthro, who again joined us. He didn't think he had much to contribute, but he had built himself a whole rig already. And then with the help of the community, he was enabled to do multiple tasks at the same time. It resulted in an innovation incubation award, then international sound awards at the Reeperbahn Festival the following year for the team. He was featured on the BBC 2 days after he premiered with his new tools. He's a music producer and video producer. He went on tour in London, in Korea. He now runs his own business, and he actually works with us as well. And then challenging, again, what we can do with frontier technologies. So this is, for instance, a new ongoing format that challenges previous music formats using artificial intelligence that have been worked on for many, many years. So we have developed experts basically within our community who are really high-level experts, for instance, in this case, in artificial intelligence and particularly neural networks. And as we know, the arts have been actually trailblazing on this front. So there are lots of artists out there really very much at the forefront of huge interest to industry, because obviously there are certain challenges that are being solved in these experimental environments that are of great relevance to industry. And here's us in residence at the largest unicorn in Europe, a phenomenal, huge company that services all the global communications for the biggest social channels. Infobip. And so this company emerged out of a small region of Istria in Europe without any Silicon Valley money, and hugely inspiring for that. And we were invited to take residence to bring the community and interact with people they brought from their offices from around the world. So this is, again, how we interact with industry. And then industry came to us, or started coming to us already when we ran our pilots with new kind of enabling tools. We put new kinds of toolkits into the hands of our developers, which led to all sorts of follow-up funding and patents and patent filing for primary industry, for example, and entrepreneurs by Forbes and MIT under 35, etc. But in this case, for example, we have Christian Gutmann, who's VP for AI for the 3rd biggest ICT company in the world, asking us, can I be part of your labs for a week? And he actually worked transgenerationally with all of the participants, and for the whole week was actually using this for personal development. And this is what's so interesting when this happens, and this is something that we keep seeing. So we actually evolved our methods and our tools to something called the Industry Commons, something that I launched back in 2017. It has since become a track, a funding program within Horizon. And so this idea of feeding best practice to policy instruments has been really quite successful. I have literally proof of 70 4% of the recommendations for the Horizon program, for the innovation recommendations that the Connect Advisory Forum had, came directly from our best practice. And then, of course, the regional dimension. So as the industry commons came round, and this is the mayor of Mannheim, very innovative mayor of a very creative city that's positioning itself in amongst the other industrial strongholds, let's say, around it in a very, very creative and interesting way. And these are ice labs that they were being announced in 2020. Then, of course, the pandemic hit, and we are going to run them this summer. But this regional dimension is so tremendously important. As I mentioned, I was actually hosting a meeting between Commissioner Ferreira's cabinet, Committee of the Regions, and Interreg Europe yesterday to see how we can align on launching a whole series of labs in an agile way across all of the European regions to create a spark that would unleash lots of new projects. And watch this space. This is something that we are working on really hard now. This is part of some of the initiatives we are taking at the New European Bauhaus, and we are allowed as members of the high-level roundtable to literally run with it if we have an idea like this. Talking about the New European Bauhaus and about the values of the New European Bauhaus, which are, of course, sustainability, inclusion, and aesthetics. And this is something that is obviously very relevant to some of the examples I've been showing you. During the pandemic, we decided to situate ourselves literally in the environment, in one of the areas of the largest biodiversity and one of the largest wetlands in Europe, in the Ria de Aveiro in Portugal. And in 2021, our theme was Just Ocean. And this idea of just could be interpreted in many different ways. And the idea of judicious, unbiased, safe, and transparent actually came from our work with data and the need that we need to actually annotate data when we work with it in terms of its biases, because no data is unbiased. But then we applied that thinking, so again, cross-disciplinary thinking, to our interaction with the environment. We had 24 people in person from, 50 people in person from 24 countries and 8 global satellites in Toronto, Chicago, Mexico City, Rio, and across European regions as well, joining us. So these are the experts in situ, cross-disciplinary community, in the salt pans of Aveiro, an area of huge biodiversity. And what we have done is we have literally a minute of people explaining what does transdisciplinary collaboration mean for them. So we'll just listen to them for a minute.
MTF to me is a meeting of minds, and it's also a meeting of hearts. There are so many people that work, create, and truly, passionately believe in a transdisciplinary approach.
To have artists and scientists and academics and industry come together and essentially cross the streams and collaborate and be in a room with people they ordinarily wouldn't have a chance to interact with, so that knowledge can sort of cross boundaries and so forth. And I think that's where the best and most imaginative innovation comes from.
It's been really fun. Well, first of all, just witnessing everybody's contributions and everybody's ideas, and also witnessing the way that people are talking, exchanging ideas, not necessarily always agreeing on everything, but also allowing this sort of non-contradictory information to remain in the space and to bubble into new ideas and new collaboration.
A oportunidade, estamos num ambiente multidisciplinar em que há especialistas e apaixonados por diferentes áreas e as conversas que acontecem na programação conseguem ser, se calhar, suplantadas pela riqueza das conversas que se têm em paralelo.
And so these collaborative environments will be familiar to you, but then there's also where do we get with them, or what do we manage to achieve? And so there is another clip about personal transformations, literally from the participants, and I always feel that it's best if you hear it from them.
Por outro lado, estar exposto a tantas pessoas interessantes e tantas pessoas criativas e tantas ideias e parece que há uma energia especial no ar nesta semana, neste edifício com estas pessoas, que eu acho que nos põe todos num estado mental de procurar coisas novas e de questionar, se calhar, as coisas a que estamos habituados, de ver coisas de outra forma. As conferências que temos visto e as pessoas que temos visto a falar já aconteceu várias vezes durante a semana, porém-me a pensar em várias coisas da minha vida, não só no meu trabalho, mas porque me oferecem pontos de vista novos.
I think the way this is going to affect my work is that I've just found a whole bunch of people who think in much the same way as I do. It sort of struck me on the first day, I think, that all these other people were saying things that have been rattling around in my brain for a long time, some of which I'd acted on, and others that I was sort of thinking that would be quite good to get underway. So, yeah, I found it, and I'm still finding it, remarkably inspiring.
Tanta informação que tenho recebido estes dias que acho que esta informação se vai transformar em inspiração futura para as minhas criações próprias.
Esta experiência já está a valer a pena, já valeu a pena e já vai contribuir não só para o meu projeto, mas para mim enquanto pessoa.
So basically the process involved literally immersing ourselves into the environment, and in this case what you're looking at is the first recording of underwater overtone singing, which is an experiment which was then used later in performance and in all of the collaborative work. And again, this is about addressing challenges hands-on. So once again, we can actually listen for a few seconds.
Climate action is such a huge part of what we need to be thinking about. And there is the digital transition and there's the green transition. And what we do is about bringing those two things together. It's about how can we make new things that not just stop us impacting badly on the world, but actually positively improve it. And so the ambition of particularly this MTF Labs, Just Ocean, is to try and put together people who can actually make a huge difference like that.
And then some people here are also interested in ritual, in indigenous science, in climate justice, in kind of ecological logic and ecological thought processes as we make music, as we create in general, and what is wasteful and what is rooted and what is necessary and what is superfluous. So, you know, at a maker type event, it's pretty special to have voices that think about ecology and about somatics.
Inspired by oceans, inspired by acoustics, inspired by deep space, questions about environment. And you bring them all together, it makes you feel like you're part of a family. And this is what MTF did for me.
So, as I say, it's always best if you hear it from the community. I mean, there's more, but this is, for example, Anya, whom you just heard during the final performance. We had 11 projects that came out, no, actually 13, I believe. And one project which was a collaboration between 40 participants, and it was a 6-part symphony about the environment, about different aspects of our interaction with the environment, our impact on the environment. Too much to cover here, but and I will skip over. We can actually hear them speak about how it's important to focus on small things. But I want to really focus on this amazing group of people that I have a privilege to be working with. And the fact that these are the people who recognize that some of these activities, and particularly placing culture in the center, as has been already mentioned today, is so important for our advancement. in all areas. And so the New European Bauhaus, as many of you will be by now aware, has not only people who are leading on it, but also 250 partners, amazing partners who are really very active and active contributors to the process of co-creation. The New European Bauhaus being founded on the principles of sustainability, inclusion and aesthetics, but of course evolving all kinds of ideas around the delivery and the methods. And currently the partners are helping us in formulating the idea of the NEB Lab, so obviously very relevant to the material that we've just seen. And the ideas have been flooding in, and literally hundreds and thousands of fantastic creative ideas that have been flooding in. The first conference that was run last year had over 8,000 participants, so it really showed the uptake of these ideas, and the language here is very clear to everybody who's part of this conference now, which is very much related to the language that has been used in the cultural creative sector for a long time. And also I want to highlight the fact that Central Europe is currently not submitting enough applications for the NEB Prize. These are the prizes from last year, which with a few clicks you can enter this virtual space on the European Commission portal to see that last year's entries. And this year prizes are guaranteed for every country. So every single country in Central Europe should actually encourage great projects that you know of to apply. This is as part of the high-level roundtable. Again, as I say, I'm very privileged to be able to work with these people. I can tell you that right now they have already joined forces over the Ukraine, and they're having an previously unplanned meeting now, or emergency meeting, if you like, to discuss what we can do, because of course all of us can do something about it. So there is action being taken, and for example, Shigeru Ban, a Japanese architect, has already offered design for shelters that can be deployed to the Ukraine. So we are looking at how we can do that. So it's really going from the grassroots, and the first thing that we mapped as high-level roundtable were our values. This is how we decided to work. We had to work really quickly. We had to work very effectively and efficiently because all the people are very, very busy with their projects. So the first thing we did was map our values, and we discovered a very strong line of justice. And this is where we decided was our starting point. We then wrote a concept paper, which is accessible online. Please do have a look at it. And this is one of the quotes from it, highlighting a pragmatic hope, grounded visions, and actionable ambition. So basically, I illustrated it with this wonderful Alan Fletcher illustration, old illustration from Domus. Architecture is optimism. And when we mapped the outcomes, desired outcomes, one of the strongest things was the idea of learning through doing, so being hands-on in these collaborative prototyping environments. And so, of course, one of the quotes from our paper is, support new interdisciplinary thinking, designing and making collaborative innovation labs and experimental learning labs. Hence the design of the NEB Lab and this grand ambition that we're currently advocating for, where we want to inject a spark in 100 regions across Europe so that everybody is involved in this prototyping on the ground. So also to conclude this series of developments of feeding policy directly from the grassroots, there have been some really fundamental paradigm shifts as a result of the activities of the New European Bauhaus. So this is referring back to some of our work in MTF Labs, where we were putting humans in the loop with industrial robotics to question the idea of Industry 4.0 automation. You will be aware, if you're following European programs, that has progressed to Industry 5.0 human-centric. But in the new European Bauhaus, we have progressed to more than human ecosystemic approaches that include all species and all ecosystems. And from my experience of 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, when we had industry days, I can tell you that entire week they were talking about ecosystemic approaches. So this placing culture and creativity at the center of decision making has actually sped up how we understand what paradigms we need to tackle. And of course, it's paramount that industry tackles their challenges in ecosystemic ways if we want a sustainable industry. So this is an example from our labs in Stockholm. These were 90 people in a decommissioned underground nuclear reactor prototyping together in the high-level labs, and maximum inclusion, all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds on a level playing field. And industry has taken really stock of inclusion and wishes to include several categories of people. But in the European Bauhaus, we've introduced this idea of radical inclusion, which doesn't place people into categories, but asks a completely different question at the beginning. And it asks, where do we converge? And we start from there. Here's us in the slush labs, and again, there's Dimitro in the foreground. Now that we think about Ukraine, I see Dimitro in all our photographs. Here we were tracking intellectual property in real time. This is 2017. Now this has actually influenced again policy, and particularly in the European Innovation Council marketplace that I'm part of the expert design group on. But and we are implementing some of these ideas. But this is about how do we use technologies for the greater good. And Industry 5.0, of course, is introducing ethics into its discourse about digitalization. But in the European Bauhaus, we have gone one step forward from there, encouraging rediscovery of indigenous technologies. So not just digitalization, but actually not forgetting skills and crafts and traditional skills and regional skills or skills of regional importance. And finally, moonshots are a really, really important part. This is Imogen Heap sending her voice to the moon in our labs in Stockholm from the decommissioned nuclear reactor via the Dwingeloo radio telescope in the north of Holland, with facilitated by artist Martin Nicole Regina. 83 people sent their voices to the moon and back, not because this is a scientific breakthrough, but because it lifts our gaze above ground and it actually reframes the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we think about our challenges. While Industry 5.0 is focusing now on upskilling by training, traditional training in European Bauhaus, we can safely say that the future of work is driven by missions. So I always end on our community, and it's about the people on the ground, about the collaborations. And I always say that if every single person that we involve in these labs that we roll out across the European regions can take one step forward in their personal development as a result of this engagement, then we will have a phenomenal social transformation as a result. So we always say, we don't predict the future, we invent it. Thank you.